European countries have reacted to Iran's execution of Ruhollah Azzam, who was convicted of espionage. They've called the act unacceptable, and that's while some of those countries, like France, harbor terrorists and brag about their human rights stance. So why then are these nations backing a man who simply instigated terrorist acts and promoted instability and violent protests in Iran?
Following his capture by Iranian intelligence agencies, Ruhollah Azzam was brought to trial and executed for his management of the Ahmad News page on the Telegram application, a page that encouraged people in Iran to commit acts of crime against public infrastructure, institutions and authorities. As a result, France, Germany, Italy and Austria have all condemned the execution of Azzam, and as an act of protest have pulled out of an online business forum in Tehran, leaving the organisers of the event forced to postpone to a future date. Some of the items on the page administered by Azzam included the incitement of terrorist acts in Iran, involving the building and use of petrol bombs, as well as actively guiding people to protest, ensuring maximum attendance during the crime sprees fueled by Azzam's instructions. Saeed Khatibzadeh, the spokesman for the Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, has claimed that the statements and speculative comments delivered by the EU was hypocritical and devoid of any value, clearly showing that they were either ignorant to the facts or were simply choosing to ignore them. In response to the act, the Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has also summoned the German and French ambassadors to the MFA in order to present representations to the heads of missions, an act that demonstrates a clear message in diplomatic terms as to the gravity of the situation. So with Iran labelling Azzam as a terrorist, why then has France, Germany and other EU nations sympathised with such a person, in particular when they were so aware of the true actions of Azzam and his so-called news channel?
I believe that it's not difficult to show that principles of the European countries, when crystallize themselves into concrete political form, they become tainted with self-interest and hypocrisy. Speaking of moderation, however, where an official and a scientist in the Islamic Republic of Iran is assassinated by terrorist elements and then condemning punishment of a rebel and not journalist vowed to undermine Iran's national security is far from hypocrisy. Western countries' intelligence, media, financial and diplomatic support of rebels whose goal is set for them to turn a country into rubble, to subvert a nation, is shameful and I think must be confronted.
What now remains to be seen is whether the EU will apply this logic across a broader screen and condemn the assassinations of senior Iranian figures by other nations, which again demonstrate more traits of terrorism against Iran that conveniently seem to be treated with silence.
So the EU appears to be playing a game of double standards when it comes to labeling people. For example, Ruhollah Azzam was called a journalist in the European Union. That's why other proscribed terrorists are offered less offensive names. For instance, the anti-Iran terrorist group Mujahideen Khalq organization known as MKO is called, quote, a resistance movement. Let's say sponsored assassins are named operatives as well. In the case of Azzam, EU needs to realize it cannot simply overlook who he cooperated with, which includes the Israeli spy agency Mossad. The bloc also needs to realize that one of its member countries, France, hosts the MKO. The terrorist organization has been involved in Azzam's illegal activities in Iran.
The Telegram application is like many other forms of social media, a tool that's used to send and share information around the world with friends and others. Although Azzam's Ahmad News had over 1 million followers at its peak, it's unfair to label the channel as a media outlet. It's hence interesting to question the EU labelling Azzam as a journalist, when in reality he was nothing more than a tool of coercion, acting as an agent provocateur on behalf of various intelligence agencies. It also raises the question as to why the term journalist was used for a man who worked in liaison with the DGSE in France and Mossad, and openly bragged that after Emmanuel Macron, he enjoyed the highest levels of state protection in France, conditions which seem a little odd for just a journalist. Furthermore, why were the French so happy to host Azzam, who, like the terrorist cult, the MEK, enjoyed the comfort and protection of living in France in spite of being involved in serious crimes and accepted as a terrorist organization by many nations around the world.
Well, he is not a journalist. What's important here, I think Iran has learned its lesson. Today, 17,000 Iranian officials and people have fallen prey to assassinations and terrorist acts of MEK that have extensive support of diplomatically and financially from Western countries.
With the EU sitting on the fence with Iran across a host of issues, in particular when it comes to the JCPOA, is now not the time for the powers of Europe to recognise Iran's inalienable right to protect interests, just as each European state does on its own, and at the same time show some level of consistency when it comes to recognising other people and groups like Ruh al-Azam and the MEK, and concentrate less on the irrelevant non-state actors, condone the state-sponsored assassinations, and build a level and safe playing field for all.